Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, listen to me carefully. When God forgives you, truly forgives you, you don't just walk away cleansed, you walk away changed. You don't just get a new page, you get a new power. You don't just feel free, you start living free, because divine forgiveness is not some abstract idea. It's not just theology, it's transformation, and when that forgiveness touches your life, there are 5 unmistakable signs you will see in yourself. Not maybe, not hopefully, you will see them. When most people think about forgiveness, they think about relief from guilt. They think of wiping the slate clean, of removing the stain of sin, of being allowed to breathe again without the weight of condemnation crushing their chest. And yes, that is part of it. But if that's all you believe forgiveness is, you've missed the power of it, because when God forgives you, He's not just erasing your mistakes, He's activating your destiny. He's not just canceling your debt, He's commissioning your calling. God's forgiveness is never just backward looking. It doesn't stop at your past. It reaches forward into your future and pulls you into alignment with why you were born in the first place. You see, sin doesn't just separate you from God. It separates you, from your identity, from your purpose, from your assignment. But when God forgives you, He restores the bridge not only between you and Him, but between you and yourself. The self He created, the version of you He designed before the foundations of the earth. So many people are living saved but stuck, spiritually clean but mentally in chains. Why? Because they accepted that God forgave their sin but never believed He still had a plan. Let me tell you, God doesn't just forgive to relieve your shame. He forgives to release your assignment. He forgives to reposition you, to put you back in the lane you were always meant to run in. Think about Moses. He killed a man, he ran away, he hid in the desert, but when God called him from that burning bush, He didn't mention the murder, He didn't replay the failure. He said, "Go to Pharaoh." In other words, let's get to your mission. The past was already handled, the future was waiting. Or consider Peter. He denied Jesus 3 times, he wept bitterly, and yet when Jesus rose, He didn't come back to shame Peter. He came back to reinstate him. "Feed my sheep," He said. That was a call, that was purpose, that was leadership. That was proof that forgiveness didn't send Peter back to square one. It launched him into a new level of spiritual authority. You need to understand something. The enemy would love for you to believe that forgiveness is just about not going to hell, that it's a legal loophole so you can sneak into heaven. But that's a shallow view of a supernatural transaction. God's forgiveness isn't just about where you won't go. It's about what you're now qualified to do. Once you're forgiven, you have access to grace, access to boldness, access to vision, access to favor. The ceiling that once hung over your head because of your sin is now shattered. You don't walk with your head low anymore. You walk with your eyes forward, not because of pride, but because of promise. When God forgives you, you stop asking, "What did I do?" and start asking, "What was I made for?" That shift is everything, because people who are only focused on their past never build their future. But when you know you've been forgiven, when you truly internalize that God has washed your record clean, not with bleach, but with blood, you start moving differently. You speak with more conviction. You love more freely. You create more boldly. You serve more sacrificially. There is a moment, quiet but undeniable, when something shifts inside a person who has truly received God's forgiveness. It's not just that they stop doing wrong. It's not even just that they start doing right. It's that the noise in their soul, the guilt, the regret, the second guessing, the inner accusation goes silent. And in its place there is peace, real peace, deep peace, not the kind the world gives, temporary and circumstantial, but the kind that only grace can deliver. Guilt is loud, it's persistent, it follows you like a shadow and waits for the quiet moments to speak. It says, "You're not worthy. You failed again. God might love you, but He doesn't like you." It twists your identity and changes your potential. It makes you second. Guess every step, every prayer, every dream. Guilt doesn't just remind you of what you did. It tries to convince you that what you did is who you are. But grace comes in like a still wind and does what guilt never can. It heals. Not by ignoring the past, but by placing it under the blood of Christ. Grace acknowledges the sin, but then points to the cross. It doesn't excuse your wrong, but it covers it. And when you accept that covering, when you believe that God has really forgiven you, the guilt begins to dissolve, and in its place, peace starts to rise. This peace isn't passive, it's powerful. It's the kind of peace that silences shame and speaks louder than your mistakes. It doesn't mean you forget what you've done, it means you stop being defined by it. You can still remember, but now that memory doesn't come with pain, it comes with praise. Because you know what you were saved from, and more importantly, what you were saved for. Many people go through the motions of faith while still living under the weight of guilt. They pray, but it's heavy. They serve, but it's performance-driven. They smile, but inside they're still not convinced they're clean. That's not the life grace produces. When grace is doing its full work, peace is the fruit. You don't have to strive for acceptance. You start from it. You don't have to beg for love. You rest in it. This peace is not the absence of consequences, and it's not the denial of failure. It's the presence of reconciliation. Between you and God, between you and yourself, and sometimes even between you and others. It's waking up in the morning and not immediately being reminded of everything you regret. It's lying down at night and knowing you're not faking it. You're actually free. And that peace becomes a testimony. People look at you and say, "How can you be so calm after everything you've been through?" And you can smile and say, "Because I'm not carrying it anymore. Grace took it off my shoulders." Peace is a sign that grace is working in your heart. It's evidence that you're not just going through religious motions, you're living in divine reality. You're not trying to earn forgiveness anymore, you've received it. You're not stuck in self-condemnation, you've embraced mercy. You're not at war within yourself, you've found rest in Him. There is a natural instinct that kicks in when we feel ashamed. We hide from others, from opportunities, from truth, even from God. It's been that way since the Garden of Eden. The moment Adam and Eve sinned, what did they do? They covered themselves and hid. Not because God rejected them, but because shame told them He would. That's what sin does. It breaks trust not only with God, but within ourselves. It creates fear where there was once boldness, distance where there was once intimacy. But the moment you realize, deep down, not just in your mind, but in your spirit, that God is not holding your sin against you, something changes. You stop running, you stop shrinking, you stop pretending, you stop wearing masks, you stop building walls, you stop living in the shadows, because now, for the first time in maybe a long time, you feel safe. Not because you're innocent, but because you're forgiven. There's a kind of courage that only comes when shame is broken. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it's quiet but unshakable. You start walking into rooms without fear of being found out. You start speaking without filtering your identity through old failures. You start dreaming again because you no longer feel disqualified. You're no longer waiting to be exposed. You're already covered by grace. You stop hiding from your calling. You stop sabotaging relationships. You stop avoiding moments that demand vulnerability. Why? Because when God isn't holding it against you, you stop holding it against yourself. So many people are stuck, not because God hasn't forgiven them, but because they haven't forgiven themselves. They're carrying guilt that heaven already released. They're living like fugitives when they've been declared free. That's what hiding looks like spiritually, sitting in the back when God called you to the front, avoiding purpose because you think you've blown your chance. But listen, when Jesus died on that cross, He didn't just pay for your sin. He paid for your restoration. And restoration includes confidence, it includes joy, it includes openness. Hiding is a signal that you haven't yet believed the fullness of His mercy. But when that truth hits you, when you realize that God, the only one with the right to condemn you, has chosen to redeem you, you don't have to hide anymore. Look at the prodigal son. He rehearsed his apology. He planned to return not as a son, but as a servant. Why? Because shame had told him he no longer belonged, but the father never even let him finish his speech. He ran to him, embraced him, put a ring on his finger, a robe on his back, and shoes on his feet. That's what grace does. It brings you out of hiding. It tells you, you're still mine, come back home. And when you finally believe that truth, it transforms your posture. You show up differently. You lead differently. You worship differently because now you know you're not being tolerated. You're being celebrated by heaven. You can breathe again. You can live again. You can love again. No more hiding. Not when the one who sees it all has already declared you forgiven. Not when the blood of Jesus speaks louder than your failure. Not when grace has kicked the door wide open and invited you back into the light. Many people stop at the doorway of forgiveness and never realize they're being invited into a throne room of purpose. They think forgiveness is just God's way of saying, "It's okay, I won't punish you." But they miss the deeper truth. Forgiveness is God's way of saying, "I still choose you. I still plan to use you. Get up. We've got work to do." Forgiveness is not the end of the story. It's the turning point that reawakens your destiny. You see, when God forgives you, he's not just erasing sin. He's restoring authority, because sin doesn't just damage your relationship with God. It damages your ability to walk confidently in what you were created to do. It takes your voice, it clouds your vision, it puts weight on your shoulders that keeps you from moving forward, and the enemy loves that. He loves when you believe you're forgiven but still feel unworthy. He loves when you pray with hesitation, when you speak with doubt, when you pursue your calling like you're sneaking in the back door of the kingdom. But here's the truth. When God forgives you, he doesn't just cleanse your record. He reestablishes your right to walk in your calling. He gives you back the authority that sin tried to strip from you. That authority doesn't come from your perfection. It comes from his mercy. It's rooted not in what you've done, but in what Jesus has done. And when you embrace that, you stop living like someone on probation and start living like a child of the King. That's what happened with so many people in Scripture. Think of Paul, a former persecutor of Christians. A man with blood on his hands, and yet when he encountered Jesus, forgiveness didn't just clean him up. It commissioned him. He didn't hide in the background. He became a bold voice, an apostle, a world changer. Not because he forgot his past, but because he knew grace had redefined it. Forgiveness gives you a holy confidence, not arrogance, not ego, confidence, the kind that says, "I may have fallen, but God has raised me up." The kind that walks into rooms knowing you don't belong because of your resume, but because of your redemption. It's not about earning your way into purpose. It's about accepting that God's already positioned you for it through his mercy. Some people live as if God has forgiven them just enough to sit on the sidelines. They don't try, they don't build, they don't speak, because deep down they still think they're disqualified. But if God only wanted you forgiven, he could have stopped there. Instead, he forgave you and then filled you with his Spirit. That means you're not just free, you're empowered. You've been forgiven to do something, to build something, to say something, to carry something. To become something that hell itself tried to block. You've been given a mandate, not just a clean conscience. Forgiveness is the launch pad, not the landing strip. So stop waiting for a feeling of worthiness to kick in. Stop rehearsing your past mistakes as if they're still in play. They're not. They've been buried under the blood, and God didn't bring you this far just to make you feel better about your past. He brought you this far to activate your future. You have authority now. Use it, step into it, speak with it, lead with it. Walk in your purpose like someone who's been trusted by God to carry something eternal. Because you have been. One of the greatest misconceptions about forgiveness is that it makes you soft. That once God forgives you, you become passive or overly sentimental, like grace turns you into someone who just shrugs at everything. But that's not what happens. True forgiveness doesn't weaken you, it deepens you. It gives you a different kind of strength, not a strength that crushes others, but one that can carry them. One that knows what it's like to be broken and still chooses to walk with people who are still breaking. When God forgives you, he doesn't just wash away your sin. He rewrites your perspective. You start to see people differently because you remember what it felt like to be in their shoes. You remember what it meant to be trapped in shame. You remember the guilt, the fear, the nights you cried in silence, unsure if you could ever be loved again. And when you remember that, you stop judging people for where they are. You start loving them toward where they could be. That's real power, the power to love the unlovable, the power to extend mercy without enabling, the power to stand in truth without throwing stones. You don't compromise your standards, but you do open your arms. And the only way you can do that is because you've stood on the receiving end of grace yourself. You know what it feels like to be given another chance, and when you've tasted that kind of mercy, you can't help but want others to taste it too. This is where many miss the mark. They get forgiven but still carry pride. They forget what they were pulled out of, so they look down instead of reaching down. They critique instead of covering. But when forgiveness has done its full work in you, it breaks that spirit of superiority. It humbles you, but it doesn't humiliate you. It gives you authority, but it doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you strong enough to love people who are hard to love because you realize you were once them. It takes strength to love people who are still in mess. It takes maturity to walk beside someone who's struggling and not feel threatened by it. And it takes grace, driven wisdom to offer help without losing yourself. But when you've been forgiven, you don't feel the need to distance yourself from broken people. You move closer, not to fix them, but to remind them what restoration looks like. Forgiven people make the best restorers. Not because they're better, but because they get it. They understand the gap between justice and mercy. They understand what it means to be guilty and still embraced, and they carry that understanding into every relationship, every conversation, every opportunity. You don't become a pushover. You become a bridge between judgment and redemption. A living testimony that says, if he did it for me, he can do it for you too. That's powerful. That's kingdom work. And that's exactly what Jesus modeled. He didn't ignore sin, but he never let sin stop him from loving. When you're truly forgiven, you carry that same spirit. You become an ambassador of grace, not just preaching it, but living it. Loving people while they're still in process, encouraging them while they still feel stuck, and standing beside them not as a judge, but as proof that freedom is possible. That's not weakness, that's not softness. That's power under control. That's mercy wrapped in strength. And that's what happens when you realize you're not just forgiven to feel good. You're forgiven to become someone who makes others feel possible again. There's something powerful that happens when you stop living under condemnation. Your mind changes, your expectations shift, your inner dialogue starts to sound different. Where there used to be fear, now there's hope. Where there was once hesitation, now there's confidence. You begin to expect good again. Not because you think you're perfect, but because you finally believe you're forgiven. Condemnation is more than just guilt. It's a mindset. It doesn't just remind you that you messed up. It tells you that you are a mess. It's the inner voice that constantly whispers, something bad is coming because of what you did. It's the spiritual and emotional consequence of believing you're still unworthy, even after God has already said you're clean. And if condemnation runs your thoughts, it will run your life. You'll sabotage opportunities because you think you don't deserve them. You'll pray like someone trying to earn God's attention instead of someone who already has his affection. You'll expect the worst, call it humility, and never realize you're actually living in fear. Fear of punishment, fear of rejection, fear that your past will always dictate your future. But when God forgives you, and when you actually believe he has, you don't just feel better emotionally. You begin to live better mentally. Your thoughts get upgraded. Grace doesn't just change your heart, it changes your headspace. You stop bracing for impact. You stop waiting for the hammer to fall. You stop interpreting every delay as a punishment, every obstacle as proof that you're still under judgment. Instead, you start to expect that God is for you, that he's actually planning something good for your life. That his promises still apply to you, even if you had a season where you fell short, and that expectation is not wishful thinking. It's faith finally free from fear. Think about the difference it makes when you walk into a new season not carrying the baggage of "I don't deserve this." You walk into rooms with authority, not apology. You pursue opportunities with faith, not fear. You step out in boldness because you've stopped letting shame vote on your decisions. Condemnation clouds your future with a filter from your past. But forgiveness clears the lens. It lets you see life again, not through the eyes of regret, but through the eyes of redemption. And once you start seeing your life that way, you start expecting God to show up, not to correct you, but to bless you. Let me be clear, this isn't prosperity hype. This isn't name it and claim it. This is the quiet, confident expectation of someone who knows they are right with God, not because of works, but because of grace. And when you know you're right with God, you stop expecting wrath and start expecting favor. You stop waiting for payback and start walking in purpose. That's not arrogance. That's what it means to live free from condemnation. Romans 8:1 says, "There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus." That's not a poetic suggestion, that's a legal ruling from heaven, and when the judge of the universe declares you not guilty, who are you to keep living like you're still on trial? You begin to expect good again, not because life is perfect, but because you've been reconciled to the one who holds your future. You start making plans, you start building, you start speaking with hope again. And the reason is simple. Condemnation no longer owns your mind. Grace does, mercy does, truth does, and when those things run your thoughts, your life follows. You live like someone who's not just forgiven, but free, forward, looking and full of divine expectation.